welcome to the Afghanistan Project Podcast. I'm your host, Beth Bailey, and I am here today with three really incredible advocates who have been deeply impacted by stop work orders and executive orders that have come out in the last 2 weeks that are harming our Afghan allies currently during a 90-day pause and other things that have really shifted the environment, not only for Afghans in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but for our allies here stateside and at various lily pads waiting for transport. So without further ado, I want to introduce Sarah Cady, who's the CEO of Resettlement Action DC, or REACT DC, Ellen Smith, who's the Executive Director of Keeping Our Promise Incorporated, and John Moses, the co-founder of Massachusetts Afghan Alliance. It's really great to have you guys here. Thanks for taking the time at what I know is an incredibly difficult juncture. I want to get started by asking you each to kind of give me an overview of what is happening, what's happened for your organization in the last 2 weeks, how these orders have impacted you, and the Afghans who you support and we're preparing to support. And Sarah, since I introduced you first, I'm going to let you take off and get going.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Beth, for having us. Happy to be joined by John and Ellen, two fellow advocates for Afghan allies. Sorry that it's under difficult circumstances, but really want to highlight, I've been in refugee resettlement work for 20 years in various capacities, and when Afghanistan collapsed in August of 2021, I was deployed from a resettlement agency to work on the local level in Northern Virginia. And I want to start by saying that working with our Afghan allies has been the greatest privilege of my entire professional life. I've now worked with thousands of Afghans in Northern Virginia. I really want to just say that what's happening now is unacceptable for the people that stood next to us in our troops, kept them safe as interpreters, as military personnel, as members of nonprofits. And we really owe it to them to make sure that their voices are being heard, and that groups like mine and John and Ellen's are raising awareness about how the executive orders have affected us. So I can go into that now, or I can let John and Ellen introduce themselves, whatever you prefer.
Okay. Why don't we do that? So, quick introductions, and then, we'll do that. So, John, do you want to go next?
Sure. John Moses, co-founder of Massachusetts Afghan Alliance, obviously Massachusetts, which was co-founded by an Afghan woman, Farisha Shams, who's an Afghan-American citizen. And just to give you a brief overview of what the last 2 weeks of have been for me as a local org, there's been a few things. So, the past 3 years after the evacuation of Afghanistan, and by the way, thank you, Sarah and Ellen, for your work as well. The past 3 years, as a veteran, I've been building out an organization with my Afghan friends to support Afghans as they came to the United States and give them the same opportunities like Vietnam veterans were able to give to their people, or to Korean War veterans were able to give to their people. And so all the programs we've built, all of the effort, all of the time to design these different programs to help people resettle in Massachusetts, we've had to pivot. We've had to look at a new model for our entire org. And the effects on the community were pretty much immediate. So I think the biggest thing, I'll focus more on the people side, because a lot of our work is, in homes and, at events and things like that. And the very first thing I'll tell you that I've seen from the Afghan people and from people like us is fear. I just mentioned my co-founder is an Afghan-American woman, and the other day we were getting set up for an event that's going to be happening local. And one of the things that we had to take into account is, what do we do if ICE shows up? What do we do if this happens? So we have a security plan, to how do we comply and how do we work with them if they show up. But more importantly, this Afghan-American woman now carries her passport around with her. And so she said to me while we were doing this tour, the last time I had to carry my identification like this was with the Taliban. And so I'll leave it at that. That's the effect that this has had on people. They feel less wanted. They don't feel safe. And they are very concerned for their people. What if their parole gets canceled? They pay attention to the news. So I'll stop there. And then, but that's my first thought when I talk about the effect locally.
Ellen, I'm really excited to have you introduce yourself too, and I want to just say, I don't know if I ever told you this, but when you introduced me, I've written about one of your cases before, Ellen, Wahid Akrami, and when you introduced me to that family, it was the first time I ever cried in an interview, listening to Wahid's mother talk about being separated from her son for 6 years, and feeling like she was dead inside, and that they carried her dead body to the U.S. when her son couldn't come because of vagaries of the SIV system that we don't have to go into here. But, that's the kind of thing that you guys are working on a daily basis, is just these heart-wrenching cases. And so I just wanted to tell you that, Ellen, that that is one moment that has always stuck with me.
And we can follow up on that story.
Oh, I know. There are good things that happened, but it's just, there's so much pain that has happened over the last years of this. And so, Ellen, I'm glad you're here. And I know how much this means to you and to Sarah and to John. So please, Ellen, introduce yourself now that I've gone and made myself cry.
So I'm the executive director and the founder of Keeping Our Promise. And this started very much as just helping a friend of a friend on Facebook who was a military captain resettle his interpreter in Syracuse, New York. And then that was in March 2014. And then he had a second interpreter come in August 2014. I thought I was done. And then I was emailed and asked if I could help some SIVs who were interpreters in Rochester who were not in very good living conditions. And it took off from there. And so here we are, almost 2,000 people later, only in Rochester. And we work with the resettlement agencies. And since virtual placement, we've been doing our own resettlement since the virtual placements program started in March of last year. And we act as the U.S. tie for resettlement purposes under that program.
Incredible. All right, Sarah, let's start with the impact. The last 2 weeks, you tell us what it's been like for React DC, which has a huge population, obviously, of Afghans in your area.
So we and the Afghan population have been profoundly affected. Instead of going over the intricacies of the executive orders, I'm just going to tell you two quick stories. So when Afghanistan collapsed, again, one of the first men that I met was a man who was able to escape by himself. When he arrived, he was clearly in a lot of distress. He didn't have any winter clothing. We literally took a jacket out of my husband's closet to give to him. He spoke no English. He was a parolee, so didn't have a work permit, needed to apply for asylum. So over the last 3 years, he has taught himself English, now speaks it fluently. He has obtained his work permit and asylum and has been working diligently for 3 years. He contacted me a few weeks ago to let me know that his wife and 4 children had finally made it to the platform in Qatar. They had a P1 refugee case, so they were able to get to Pakistan and then were relocated to Camp Al Saliyah. They are now stuck. The man is distraught. He is texting me constantly because he's hearing different information. They also were in the process of doing a follow to join petition, but they did not get there, the follow to join petition for asylees. As refugees, they are stuck. He has rented a house that he cannot afford. This is exacerbating his PTSD, and his wife and children are distraught. I have told him that they are not coming, at least until the 90-day suspension is over. They're not coming. And that is the people and the families, him here, who has done everything right. He has worked diligently. He applied for asylum. He has learned English. He stood by our forces, our troops, our NGOs, our companies. And now he came in the other day and I had to look him in the face and say, they will not come until April at the earliest. And there is a good possibility they won't come after that for a while, right? There's nothing to be done. The other example, so that was the first executive order, which immediately on the 20th suspended all refugee admissions. We thought we had until the 27th to get some families here, and they changed it until the 20th. Immediate suspension of all arrivals around the world, not just Afghans. The second one, which has profoundly affected us, so since October 1st, we have welcomed 74 Afghan individuals through our reception and placement resettlement program. That's a pretty good number for a small grassroots agency like me. On January 24th, all resettlement agencies were told to immediately stop work. That means that if I want to serve the 74 Afghans that are here if I want to help them get food stamps, if I want to help them get a job, if I want to put the kids in school, if I want to help them enroll in English, if I want to pay their rent before they quickly become self-sufficient. It's going to take a couple weeks, a month to get folks jobs just while we're waiting on documentation. I cannot do it unless I use my own private resources, which I will continue to do. But as a small nonprofit, I cannot sustain operations to serve the Afghans that are already here unless I have a large amount of private donations. Right. So February rent is due. I'm writing checks, and I don't know what will happen with March rent.
That reminds me of, the post-evacuation times when, everybody was trying to buy safe houses in Afghanistan and keep those going. And it's just unconscionable to me that it's happening stateside now too because of this. I think somebody said.
If I pop in on that reunification conversation too? I just like Sarah, I just wanted to point out. I just mentioned that reunification cases. I think one of the things in our nonprofit in Massachusetts is we try to find reunification families to talk them through the process to understand they're not alone. All those things. So I've handled dozens of people that are separated from their families. One family was at Abbey Gate, different family was separated at the wall and the kid got through, but he ended up here with his dad. So we have all these reunification cases that for over the 3 years of the last administration, we'd worked really hard to say, hey, if you don't win the election or if something happens in the next administration, we really need to get these reunification cases done. And I want to say the first failure is there. The failure of the United States to actively separate people and not put them back together, this is the natural outcome of that. But since then, right, so now I have a bunch of 17-year-old kids, 18-year-old kids that have graduated. They're graduating high school in the United States. And I've had to sit in rooms with these young men and their families and their fathers and say, hey, I know you have a disabled son and a sick mom over in Afghanistan with 3 sisters that can't go to school. I'm sorry, but it's April right now. And that's what you have to say. And I think the hardest part is they know it's not your fault, but who else can they talk to? Who else talks to the government? Who else talks to the care team? Who knows what the care team is? And, in our town, we've had to do work with the local school counselors and things like that to make sure that they know that this trauma is coming and it's going to be pretty deep. And also we were fortunate. We got an AAPI, grant right before all this happened, literally right before everything changed. And we're going to use that like Sarah is, instead of using it for the things we wanted to use it for education and this other stuff, we're going to find other more immediate needs, the hierarchy of needs with Afghans and go out and talk to them and work with them. But yeah, it's been brutal. It's been really hard. And I'm really tired of seeing the kids crying. These kids don't deserve what they've gone through. So I'll pause there.
Ellen, how about you? What has the last 2 weeks looked like at keeping our promise?
The first day, one of my staff members came in and just said, I feel so hopeless, because she is waiting. She's got her work permit, her asylum cases going forward. And she just said, I feel so hopeless. And then another gentleman said to me, I'm here with my family. Where do we go if, all of a sudden our asylum is denied? I mean, they've applied and they think they're going forward with their case. In terms of Camp El Salia, I have to say that when there was the shutdown of IOM, we got immediate stories out of the camp that all of a sudden there were no diapers and no sanitary products available for the women because that was provided by IOM. Now, spare me. Give me a break, right? I don't know if the idea was, we're going to enforce the SNAP rules on the families at the camp. They can only have food. They're not allowed hygiene products, right? But then CARE took that over. So that's been solved. But just the things that have happened are crazy. For us, we are lucky in that we do have a grant to help our families with housing. And thanks to the Mother Cabrini Foundation, I have, for the first time, a full staff in 10 years of case managers because of the Mother Cabrini Foundation, and we are not under this order, thank God,
Thank God.
for Mother Cabrini. So we have a lot of people that have been affected. Since January 2nd, we have brought in 48 Afghan individuals, family units and individuals. And from October through December, the people who still need help, it's 79 people who need help. And that's in partnership, some of these with the resettlement agencies who have had to stop immediately serving them. So what I have told the agencies is KOP will step in and we will help. In terms of money, however, we've got 127 individuals who are, and I'm going to use this term, owed their money through virtual placement, and that those monies total $89,600. $89,600 for the individuals in Rochester who are owed their resettlement funds so they can use that money to help pay for their housing. Now, if they don't have that money, that falls back on us, right? I am going to be doing my first fundraiser in about 2 weeks. We're going to do all these mini fundraisers. We're going to have a big gala on May 1st. And I'm just going to work around the system. And the other thing I'm doing is, yes, flights are shut down. I will, if I can, raise the money and bring these families in myself. That's what I'm doing. I've got a family of 3 that we just got out of Rwanda. They're landing in Chicago tonight. I got a guy out of Pakistan. I will work around this. The other issue is Miles for Migrants. A partner organization has shut down. And it's been a great, 8-year partnership. We've had people donate their frequent flyer miles to them, and then they arrange flights for our families instead of IOM. And I don't have that option anymore. We're going to try to do our own little mini Miles for Migrants program to bring families to Rochester. I don't know what else to do. And the other thing I want to say is I just never thought it was fair that Afghan SIVs should have to pay for their flights after serving the United States. And that's why I have always partnered with Miles for Migrants on this, because I just think it's ridiculous. You do not ask your allies to pay that money to have their life saved for working for us. So.
Absolutely. I would love for you guys to dispel a rumor that came up on the podcast comments section a little while ago. Someone had said, all the Afghans who came here in August of 2021 are on government support. Tell me, Sarah, you kind of mentioned this in when you were talking about how, everybody needs help when they get here. But tell me, how many Afghans are in the area that you serve, and how many of them actually require government support once they get going?
So thousands of Afghans are here, and when they first arrive, while they're waiting for Social Security cards and work permits, many of them do access food stamps. We, as a resettlement agency, are exclusively judged on self-sufficiency. We report at every case at 90 days if the family is self-sufficient or not. My team knows that the only way to survive in Northern Virginia is to get gainful employment at a good wage, and our families know that. And most of the Afghans go to work right away. Many of them have 2 people working in the house. We have women who work. We see the principal applicant, who is often the male, sometimes is taking 2 jobs. Many of them take a job during the day and then drive Uber or Lyft in the evening. And so it can absolutely be dispelled that refugee resettlement agencies and all support groups understand that the only way to survive in the United States is to work.
Yeah.
It's the only reality. And so I have my reception and placement case managers make referrals to my employment team immediately upon arrival, and we have a huge focus on employment.
Yeah. I would add to that. Here's the thing is and especially when it relates to Afghans, A lot of the Afghans that arrive in the United States might be private resettlement, but generally speaking, Afghans have other veterans that are working to assist them, right? Here's my experience with Afghans. They do get some benefits up front. You know, the RMP money is really important for rent and all that stuff. But every single Afghan that I have met and that we have placed has wanted to work. All they want to do is work. If they're a woman or a girl that hasn't been to like high school, they want to go to high school. If they haven't been to college, they're going to go to college and they're going to work to do it. The Afghan people understand what it means to have freedom and to have self-sufficiency. And anybody that's met an Afghan or been to Afghanistan understands that they're just like us. They want to build a life. They want to send their kids to school. They don't want to be harassed by government agents all the time. They just wanted to live their life, and they typically have a broader support than most people. You know, we brought a family into Newton, Mass. She's a highly educated woman, came through Pakistan. We got her on asylum. Before we could even get her in the department, she's like, when can I work? And I was like, well, hold on. We're on step one. But eventually, I didn't have to do anything. A lot of those families will go through, they'll figure out the paperwork, they'll do it, and then they'll come out and they'll be like, look at all the great work we do, and they just want to high five and thank, welcome to America, right? I take a special umbrage to people saying that refugees generally are lazy, but especially Afghans with the level of support they have. It's a very narrow point of view that doesn't take into account how many people really like to help refugees and want to be part of the work.
Ellen, how about you? Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, we just had one of our evacuees just bought a house 3 months ago. So when our families get here, what I tell them is, they're living in very small apartments, affordable considering other parts of the country, right? And I tell them these are small. Sorry, your kids share a bedroom. But my goal for you in 3 to 4 years is to buy a home. That's my goal for you. We have had 40 families since 2018 buy homes in the Rochester area. I mean, and part of it, and there's 2 components that we have in our program that resettlement agencies aren't permitted to offer. And the first one is if someone wants to go into a skilled trades program that is approved by DSS, the Department of Social Services, we will help them through that program. And these programs are generally 6 to 9 months. That means that their DSS doesn't pay all their rent. So we are going to pay the difference between their DSS and their rent so they can go through that program. And we will also pay their utility bills so they can go through that program, right? And these guys are coming out, they're certified car mechanics, they're electricians with residential and commercial permits to work, HVAC guys. We have a big optics, 3 optics factories in the Rochester area, Bosch and Loam, Corning Glass, and I can't think of the third one, but they make eyeglasses and specialty lenses. We also, in the Rochester area, have companies that make the lenses for military equipment. And these guys go to work there, and they are trained to do this high-level manufacturing work, and they're good workers, and they're very much appreciated. And like Sarah and John said, they will typically work a second job on the weekends or in the evenings. And what they tell me is, like, the second job is saving up for their house, or the second job might be because they have to support their parents or their mom and sisters over in Afghanistan. So the people that we do see who have to remain on SNAP are generally the larger families. And so, there's 6 kids, or it's a family of 10. But if they have older children and those older children are working, they will come off of SNAP.
Yeah. And older kids do work. I know some high school kids that are working 30, whatever their maximum allowed is. And then we have like one kid who's like, I just don't report my hours and I work 40 something hours a week while going to school. Yeah. And these are specifically reunification cases, and I have found that they tend to work themselves until they, because they just don't want to think about anything else, so they work a lot. But yeah, it's really interesting that the people that show up on refugee resettlement, a lot of the complaints are, well, they don't have housing, they're mooches off of society, and it's just broadly not true. And if that were true, if that's what people were really concerned about, why stop private resettlement where people are raising their own money, right? You wanted to bring people into the communities that were supported, had their own apartments, had their own teams, had their own money, and we did that, and it still wasn't good enough, right? So at this point, I just think the EOs and these effects, I don't think people expected them to be this broad or this deep or this or not so well thought out. I don't know how to say that the right way, but I think you know what I mean.
Thank you. Can I just expand on what John said? Thank you for bringing up private sponsorship. React DC is also what's called a private sponsor organization through the Welcome Corps. So that enables private citizens to raise the funds and to welcome newcomers directly.
Yeah.
So we've welcomed lots of folks that way as well. That program was also immediately suspended. And so both ways through official resettlement, whether it be that, brick and mortar resettlement agencies or private sponsor organizations that are enabling private citizens were both immediately suspended.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's so, I was amazed at just everything. And I would love, later I want to ask you guys each, the personal impact of this on you, but there's one other thing I want to dispel before we get there, which is another fun fact from the internet, right? That all of our allies came over in August of 2021, right? They came over please tell me, you're just in your cases that you both, Sarah and Ellen, you brought up, you had around 70 folks each in the last little bit. Can you tell me about some of the things that they did for our country, just those recent arrivals, and maybe other cases that you've had over the last 3 years that show that no, in fact, our allies, I can tell you right now, there are 128,000 SIV applicants in process. That doesn't even include the estimated 4.5 family members per applicant who come over, who we left behind. In addition to, now, it used to be that state would tell me that they had about 27,000 people that they'd accepted into P1 and P2 alone. And now the numbers look like it's 50 to 60 P1 and P2 who are unprocessed and waiting for a flight out of Afghanistan or Pakistan. That's almost 200,000 together. That doesn't include P3. That doesn't include P4, the Welcome Corps. So those are all left behind. And then with their family members, we're talking almost, you could almost estimate close to 1 million people who are impacted by these programs that we have created. And so please, can you tell me some of those stories of the things that the people that you're helping have done for our country and why they deserve to be here now? Sarah,
Beth,
I'll let you.
Ellen. Yeah, let me start, because I bring this family up frequently. It's the drone strike family.
Oh, yeah.
We have not gotten out all of the people that we mistakenly killed in the drone strike of the aid worker. So I am waiting. We were told in May by DOD that the remaining 7 family members that I'm trying to get to Rochester, would be processed. Crickets, nothing. Crickets make a noise. Nothing. So
can I pause and we can tell? I want to explain the drone strike because some people might not remember this. Right after the Abbey Gate bombing, we thought that we were tracking an ISIS member with a car bomb, and we sent down a Predator sent down like a Hellfire missile or something, I think, and it hit the car, and it turned out to be an aid worker coming home, and they hit the car while he was parked in his home. It killed him. It killed many of his children and nieces and nephews. And we promised them in exchange, when we realized that, what was in the back of his car were water jugs that he had filled up at his workplace because there was a water shortage. And when we recognized that, we as a country said, here, you can, your family members, approved family members can be resettled here. We're going to pay you damages, which never got paid. And then they were going to resettle the members of the NGO that the guy worked for, because obviously this elevated the profile of that NGO too. And so that's what Ellen's talking about, is this drone strike that happened, I think 1 or 2 days after the Abbey Gate bombing.
Right.
All right, keep going. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure people were tracking.
We've got an attorney in Afghanistan who prosecuted a judge for taking bribes, right? And and worked. There's a JAG officer. This is a case involving a U.S. JAG officer and the person she trained and worked with, who prosecuted this judge for taking bribes. And now this person is worried about his life and his family's life. And, we see they were scheduled to go to Frankfurt. And then, of course, our resettlement or that platform closed. His visa never got changed, or his paperwork never got changed to move him to another platform, and he's still stuck. And this is someone who is going to be killed, should he be found. And that judge, by the way, is out of jail. So, we all have these very personal stories of who is left behind.
Yeah. And they, outside, one of the things for like us is, so I have an SIV still in, and no, this is not my org. This is just John. I do a lot of work with Afghans on my own. I have an interpreter that was an incredibly high value target that I've been working now with for 2.5 years. And like a lot of volunteers support families directly. So, one of the things that we were really looking forward to is getting this last SIV family out, this guy that really earned it, that has some really incredible photos of the work he did with Americans and has this incredible history. And, I don't mind supporting, our Afghan allies. Here's the problem, though, is the United States government is no longer a willing partner. So I was really looking forward to not paying $400 a month in rent in Afghanistan, right? I was really looking forward to Fahim coming here and experiencing all the things I had told him about. I'm trying to get him. I try to get all Afghans to Massachusetts. So if you're Afghan, come to Massachusetts. So I'm trying to get this guy to come to Massachusetts, and his KBL number changed. And I'm like, bro, you're on the path. We're going to get you here. We can finally pay money to have you pay rent here instead of in Afghanistan. And I'm just really thrilled for this guy. And, I had to tell him it paused, right? And imagine this guy who's gone out and done work, and he has stories about, dragging soldiers out of trenches and all these things. I've never met this person. This is just an interpreter that found me, that had a compelling story. And I was like, you know what, I'll take on one more case. And I would just say that there have been many generations outside of that. The original question was, Afghans have been coming here for the past 3 years, but they've also been coming here in previous generations. In the 90s, they were coming, although they're not a huge population then. My interpreters are both American citizens. They came, I think, in 2014 or 2015. My co-founder came in 2019, and she's already an American citizen. So there have been waves of Afghans that have come through, and a trickle through the SIV program, especially through the last, the 4 years of the Trump administration. But Afghans have always been part of the American culture. And until we put our eyes on them in 2001, I think that's when soldiers and diplomats and volunteers figured out, wow, these people are really amazing, and they put up with a lot, and they just want to be successful and be free. And that's it.
Thank you both.
Sarah?
Can I just add to, apart from obviously the judges and the interpreters and the translators and the people that worked for our NGOs and with our embassy and all of those, the folks who've been largely arriving recently are reunifying with family members. Mm-hmm. And so the first, if you managed to get out during the evacuation, you left your family behind generally, right? If you managed to get your whole family out, great, but many people did not. And so particularly in Northern Virginia, the cases I see, because we have something called a placement restriction, in order to come to Northern Virginia, you have to be reunifying with an immediate family member. And so now our Afghan allies who risked their lives for 20 years to support us are now being separated from their immediate family. And so that, I think, is also what is so soul crushing for our allies. So you risked your life for 20 years, you left everything behind in the evacuation, and now you're being separated from your wife, your children, your brother, your mother, your father. So that's what we see. Every case we interact with has a relative here in Northern Virginia that's willing and able to welcome them, and they can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all a lot. I'd love to have you guys talk about how this has impacted you just on an emotional and, time and all the things. Like, what has this taken from you over the last 2 weeks? I don't know who wants to start. That's a pretty heavy question to answer.
I mean,
John, I know you you've
I've
probably
been on
thought
a
about it a
continuous
lot.
PTSD loop for 2 weeks. So my thing is now I'm getting frustrated, right? So there was this time where I was like, the administration, this is probably a mistake. Like there's no way they did this on purpose, even though they did. But we had to kind of go play the game. I'm at the point where it's very clear to me that it's not an accident, and that this has been brutal. It's been really hard, and I've been having a real struggle. Like it's nearly an impossible puzzle to solve. And so what we've been doing is trying to think about what we can do, like locally. How can we get Afghans together safely and all that stuff? But for me personally, I just keep running through these scenarios in my head and seeking out cases that might be able to help. And because we're all case people, we like to get people out of Afghanistan and help people. And there are very few of those left. So, the most joy I've really felt in the last 2 weeks was we had an Afghan American sponsoring her husband that we figured out she's still eligible to come, her husband. And so like I've grabbed onto this one case and I'm like, I'm getting this through whatever process it's going to go through. But like, I'll give it to you I'll just say one more thing. It's hard for me as a veteran to have helped people get out of a place that was dangerous and uncomfortable and unsafe for them. And to have those people show up in the United States and have somebody win that makes them feel unsafe, uncomfortable. I feel like all the work we did over the past 4 years has landed them right back where they started. It feels like a betrayal. That's what it feels like to me.
I can understand that, and I think, I have listened to a lot of people in the community who think that this was not what was intended, right? And I know that I got used to not hearing about Afghanistan from President Biden, and that really, really angered me.
Yeah.
Because there was so much, even if the withdrawal was going to go poorly, no matter who, I always believed that the withdrawal would never be easy. But it was the continuous mistakes accrued over the next years and the inability to say, oh no, we have messed up, and oh no, here are people who are still in harm's way because of the decisions we made. That really bothered me. But President Trump in his lead up to taking office talked about Afghanistan frequently, and so this feels particularly I wasn't watching it the way that I think a lot of resettlement people probably were watching and preparing, knowing what had happened before, in the last. So for me, it hit hard, and I feel personally, I know this isn't about me right now, but it feels a lot like 2021 again, and it's very unsettling and very scary, and it feels like there's a lot of uncertainty, and I hear it in the Afghans. I've probably had 300 Afghans send me emails in the last week and a half just begging me to raise their voice and to talk about the devastation that they feel right now left behind. So, and to hear then that it extends to this country, like you said, John, it hurts in
I
a
want
really
to
deep way.
remind people too that in the before Biden left office, he extended temporary protective status to various groups of refugees, and he did not include Afghans in that. And that was, there was no mistake there. There was no, like, what did Afghans do to him?
I know what it is. I can tell you exactly what it was, because I've talked about this a lot. I think President Biden loved to accept the success of Afghan evac, the airplanes and the DOD and the State Department, and we got 130,000 people out. But the failure of Afghanistan, he was very careful not to talk about. And he didn't even talk about it in the State of the Union address that year. He talked about burn pits. I think President Biden was ashamed of the failure of Afghanistan, but that whole narcissistic part of anybody in that level of politics definitely took all the credit for it. So I hear you, and I think Biden didn't want to acknowledge us as a veterans. He didn't want to acknowledge the Afghans or the entire event personally.
The other thing that I find quite disturbing is just the level of anti-Muslim sentiment in President Trump's administration. I mean, people at the White House have said that they don't want Muslims in the United States. This is a Christian nation, and that has to play a role in this. And I believe that, and I just wish that I could get people like Stephen Miller to sit down with our Afghan friends and realize how they're hardworking Americans like everyone else, and they're not scary people. And I also like to remind people, and I do so all the time because people bring up 9/11, that there was not one single Afghan that attacked us on 9/11, not one.
Sarah, do you have anything to add about the impact? I didn't mean to be political, and I hope that at least I've tried to, this has been a political, on all
This
the
is
sides.
reality, Beth.
Yeah.
I'm not talking politics here.
Yeah.
Stephen Miller has said that he does not want Muslims in the country, and he is in the White House advising our president.
Absolutely.
Is that political? That's just a fact.
Yeah, I'm not. I just mean me. I brought up Biden and Trump, and I never intended to do that. And I just don't want to turn anybody off listening, because I know how this has been for the last 3 years, right?
I can say some pretty critical things about President Biden and President Trump. I think there are failures across the board there. And if anybody's watching it, this work has never been political for us. Right? It was always bipartisan. It was always non-ideological.
And that is exactly what I wanted to say, is that
And
I don't ever want to
bipartisan.
come across as saying, one side is better than the other. I want to make it clear that these are humans
Yes.
that need help.
And
that's-
no one has, in terms of the SIV program, no administration has ever done what they were supposed to do, which is get these applications processed within 9 months and get them here. There is still a pending lawsuit with IRAP against the government on this. The Biden administration wanted to drop the requirements of the court for reporting on this, and the court wouldn't let them. But the Afghans have always gotten a raw deal in this, always.
Yep. And how many Afghans died waiting for SIV? We
Well,
acknowledge that.
I have at least 10 on my wall, cases that I was working on, and they were killed before they got here.
And I know how the Taliban works too. As soon as something is popping off somewhere else, the Taliban start doing their stuff. I just got another email the other day of like 5 former intelligence professionals who were found murdered in Afghanistan. And I don't know that any of them would have qualified for SIV, but the Taliban's reprisal campaign has not ceased. And, it escalates every time that they think that the eyes of the world are elsewhere. So that's an important thing to keep in mind at this juncture too, I think. What are you all going to need, worst and best case scenario? Let's say in April things start back up and they're good. What is going to be the deficit for you? Or what if in April things cease completely? I'd like to know what your organizations need and how listeners can help, and what the outlook is right now. Who would like to start that? Sarah?
I can address that, but I do want to just go back to what you said, how it's been affecting us. I want to just note that 2/3 of my staff are Afghan. Many of them are evacuees themselves. And so these are also people that risked their lives for 20 years that are now choosing to help new arrivals. And when you're making tea in the kitchen as the CEO and they're asking if they should carry their papers and you're telling them yes, it adds another element of distress, and it's surreal, right? And I think the roller coaster of emotions is, you could say the refugee admissions program suspension was fairly expected. Still awful, but fairly expected. So I'm trying to get some hope in my staff who go home and are members of the Afghan community. So I said, hey, SIV case coming on the 28th. And then my Afghan resettlement manager says to the whole staff, case is canceled, right? And that was because the suspension on foreign aid, because IOM is suspended. So anytime there's a glimmer of hope and then it's taken away, and then we learn that there's a federal pause. As of whatever day that was issued, it's been a long 2 weeks. I thought all my funding was done, right? Then it's retracted. And so again, I'm making decisions about, am I going to be paying rent or laying off evacuee staff, right? Impossible decisions that no Afghan ally should be caught up in. So I just wanted to say that. And then in terms of what we need advocacy. We need people to raise their voices, particularly I think the veteran community, John, so thank you. We need donations. I mean, if I'm paying people's rent with private funding and this suspension, the stop work order and or the suspension goes through April, we will not exist. We will not exist. And so who is going to help the Afghans that are already here, right? It's just a reality.
I just want to say one thing. And imagine doing these executive orders, right? And putting these executive orders out. Look where all the harm lands from these big executive orders at the top, right? It's literally like volunteers in the ground spending their own money. It's like veterans raising money to like help put somebody. All of the damage from these, it doesn't hurt IANE and the DEI initiatives that they're whatever. Like, it doesn't hurt them. It doesn't hurt politicians necessarily unless we make it painful. But for real, like, these EOs reach directly into our communities and pulled the rug out from under people, pulled the rug out from under all of us. And we're now kind of in this phase where, like, even the veterans, right? So I always lean on the veteran thing. It's, it's my privilege. I get this privilege of being a veteran. I'm going to use it to kick down doors. I thought that relationship with that many Republicans would probably got kind of a kibosh on all this, and it didn't. And we have to go to those people that continue to support Stephen Miller and say, hey, WTF, the damage you're doing is to veterans, and it's going to volunteers, and it's not just in Massachusetts or in blue states. I mean, Republicans live in our state and support Afghans too. And in the red states, there are people that want to help Afghans. And that's the thing is Americans don't realize. A lot of people think it's their country. But there are people like us banding together to make sure these people show up and have a good experience, and you've just wiped all that potential out. So these executive orders have very local impacts, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, for keeping our promise, I'm going to work around these orders until they're overturned. We don't lobby, right? I'm going to work around them. I am going to raise money. I'm going to get people here. I have asked friends who know our politicians if we can please get people out of Qatar who have their visas, like a family that was to arrive last week. They have their visas in their hand. Let me fly them out. And I was told, nope, can't do that because IOM or had to take them to the airport. So they're essentially being held hostage as far as I'm concerned in Qatar. I've got a family in Turkey whose visas expire February 3rd. I really need to get them here. So for us, it's going to be raising the money for these flights, especially since Miles for Migrants is shut down. There are no IOM flights, and I will work on the little dinners that we have around Rochester and raising money the best I can to support these families when they come. But I'm not giving up, and I'm going to work around this. If they are not on a platform that they can't leave, I am going to work around it because the visas are still getting processed.
Yeah.
So I will work around it, but it is going to require a significant amount of money to do this.
I think all of us are looking for some kind of private foundation that has, either veteran or refugee. I'm at a spot where, like Mass Afghans, at a spot where we don't really have a plan or a program because everything we designed just blew up, right? So, like, for me, I've been going out shopping private foundations, say, hey, we're looking for a mission. We've built some stuff and kind of some ideas of, like, how we're going to build our programs out. But, like, I would love the foundation to come in and say, hey, we know we can help you build these things, or help Sarah or help Ellen and say, look, there are groups of veterans and volunteers. I'm just hoping there's somebody like the Cummings Foundation or another foundation that's willing to come out and say, hey, we understand that this has been a devastating impact on communities, the communities we're in. So Cummings is a Massachusetts foundation. Let's design a program together. Let's figure out a way to serve these people, and we'll make sure that the programs are a success and they represent your money well. I mean, that's all we really can do. And I for the next 4 years, I won't be applying. Even if there is, I'm not applying for federal money because also there is a fear if we make mistakes now as a 501 that the new EOs they can strip your 501c3 order. So imagine you have a dinner or one of your events, Ellen, and like ICE shows up and there's somebody illegal in the room, right? Not illegal, undocumented, the right term. they're undocumented in the room, and all of a sudden your org is associated with it, and then they don't put a lot of thought into things, and then losing your 501 status, and imagine that like devastation. So this fear, not just in the community, this fear of helping people, which I'm going to continue to help people, but like these are real fears and risks now as, founders we have to take into account.
And I would love to mention, you guys are 3 organizations that do this. Just do a quick little search on your computer. There are Afghan alliance type organizations throughout this country who are in this position right now. And of course, people who support refugees from other countries as well. Like there is so much need right now to keep this going. And I hope that people can help. And understand that this is not, like we've talked about, Afghans are going to get off of this assistance, that the assistance is needed in the beginning. They're going to take off. They're going to do great things for this country. They already have done great things for this country. They've been living with uncertainty for the last 3.5 years while we waited for their processing, which was supposed to take either 9 months or 12 to 18 months. And obviously, we failed. Right? Our government failed, and now our government has thrown another set of bricks in a slowly moving wheel. So
I want to add on what Afghans say to me when they see these failures of the government. And that is, they know that myself and our volunteers are working hard for them, and they thank us. Despite the failures of our government, despite still being stuck in Afghanistan, they say to me, ma'am, I know you're doing the best you can. I know you. And it's a heavy burden.
Yeah.
Right? It is a heavy burden. But it's also why I don't give up, because who else has their voice? Yeah. It's got to be us who work with them.
You guys have a huge responsibility. It's really heavy. And I'll say what I said when Kate Kavarovic and Sean Van Diver were on and we stopped recording, and I said, I hope you guys are making sure you don't get burnt out right now, because it's a really easy time to just work yourself into not being helpful,
I'm going to fulfill my promise to the Afghans. So when I was in Afghanistan, I made promises to people. People have said you shouldn't have made promises. Well, I didn't make the promise. The United States made the promise with the SIV program and by founding a country, helping them found a new republic that we also let fail. So while the United States may fail their promise, I'm not. I'll be doing this for the rest of my life. This is my new thing. So not new.
Yep.
Yeah.
People of the United States are not going to give up.
No.
Yeah. And I've worked with refugee populations from around the world, and Afghans, I'm not a vet, but Afghans have a really deep place in my heart. And I've said before, no Afghan allies going homeless in Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
And on my watch, and I will fulfill that pledge. But unless we raise substantial private donations, it's a very real reality that Afghans that are already here are going to face housing insecurity.
Yeah.
Sarah, do we want to run turns running through our donation link real quick? Can we do that?
Sure.
Yeah, and I want you guys to all send me all of those links too, and they will be in the show notes. So just scroll down and donate. But yeah, if you guys want to, read out your links now, or just say where.
ReactDC.org.
Okay.
That's it. ReactDC.org. And I'm getting a lot of small donations, and I'm deeply grateful. But we need a lot more.
Yeah.
I've been getting a lot of small donations too. massafghanalliance.org/donate. The funds right now are being used for families that are already here. So places that we can kind of spot check and make sure we help people. Plus we're holding some events. We're still figuring out how to do those safely, but that's what the money's used for.
Yeah, and for us, it's keepingourpromise.org, and you go to the Donate Now button. And yes, we're getting a lot of small donations. More funds are needed, and it's helping those who are here. But I also have, like someone whose visa expires on February 3rd in Turkey, and we need to get them here. Yeah. Because otherwise it just puts them back into this morass system.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to give you all, if there's anything else you want to add, this is your opportunity to do it. Closing remarks, things you didn't get to bring up, whatever is on your mind.
I'll just say quickly, if you are, and I know I'm kind of mirroring, the Afghan evac thing. This has been non-ideological, non-political. If you're a Republican or MAGA or whatever that has access to the administration, let Afghan veterans show this administration how immigration can work by doing it with Afghans that we trust and know. Like, I know you want to shut it down to start from scratch, but if you have friends within these administrations and Congress, whatever, let veterans and the volunteers that have surrounded us and helped us do this work and show you how it goes. So that's all I have to say. And thank you for all your support, everybody.
Sarah, Ellen, anything? Sarah, you want to go first?
I was going to say, I mean, again, to end on a positive note, which again, I'm trying to tell my staff daily. So we had a bunch of Afghans that were here this week applying for green cards, a large adjustment of status clinic. We just started our second round of women's empowerment programming, specifically for Afghan women. So they're learning how to turn on their computers and they're learning basic English. We have a huge sewing group. And so we will continue the work. We're continuing the work because there's so much that needs to be done, and we owe it to our Afghan allies.
Yeah, and that's what I want to say too. We're continuing our work. Afghan women are getting to learn to drive in our driving program, and that helps the entire family, and everyone's excited that mom can finally drive, and it's not just on dad. And there are so many positive things, and they're still going to happen, and all of us are just not giving up.
That's the most amazing thing about this effort, right? I remember when I first started covering what you guys and all the evacuation groups too were doing as we started to coordinate getting people who were left behind out there. I watched as there was some attrition, right? People had to leave because they were losing their jobs or whatnot. There were people who couldn't continue volunteering, but I feel like the people who are still doing this now, who have made it their life, they're not gonna quit. Like, no one is going to actually quit this fight for Afghans, because I think once you get involved in it, you just can't. Afghans are amazing people. All of the allies that you meet are amazing people. It's a
mission, Beth.
Yeah, it is. It's a call. Yeah, it's a calling. It's a mission. It is it's an incredible thing to be part of. As many of you know, we like to end every episode with a letter from an Afghan about their current situation, and the series of executive orders that have come out have really stirred up a lot of tumult, and we do have stories that will be included in the next few episodes. I will read you this one from an anonymous ally of the U.S. I am a longtime veteran of the U.S. Air Force seeking urgent help from President Trump with bringing my family members in Afghanistan and the lily pad in Doha to safety in the United States. President Trump would be a hero to me and the veterans and military members like me if he could right the wrongs of the former administration caused by its disastrous evacuation from Afghanistan by utilizing the exemption authority in executive order realigning the U.S. RAP for Afghan allies referred directly by the Department of Defense. The Afghanistan crisis is personal to me. I am an Afghan American of Pashtun descent and served the U.S. for 26 years as an active duty member of the U.S. Air Force, as well as another 7 years as a defense contractor. My country recognized my service with a 6-foot bronze statue in my likeness, which stands near the U.S. Special Operations Headquarters, where I served for almost 10 years. While honored, all I currently desire is for my loved ones to be safe. Because of my extensive military service to the U.S., my family members in Afghanistan continue to be under threat of Taliban retribution and imminent death. I know firsthand the cause of this conflict. My best friend on active duty was killed in Kabul. My cousin, who was like a brother because we grew up in the same house, was killed by a vehicle bomb. Just last month, the Taliban killed a U.S. service member's family member in Afghanistan because the Taliban found out about their family member's service to our great country. At any moment, the same could happen to my family. I and so many other Afghan American service members have given over and over again to the United States. I and veterans and military members like me respectfully call on President Trump to distinguish and exempt a narrow group of Afghan allies referred directly by DoD into the P1 USRAP pathway from the pause in admissions. This is a small number of exceptional individuals who are not your average refugee. Afghans with DoD referral are family members of active duty U.S. military personnel and allies who worked in country with a member of the U.S. military who has known them for years or decades, personally recommended them to get into this program, and often raised money to finance their resettlement. These allies have a member of the U.S. military gunning to bring them here who is personally invested in their survival and the national security of the U.S. Having made a life of serving the United States' national security interests, I would not ask of my government to institute any policy that risks our national security. But this narrow, targeted exemption under the wise direction of the Trump administration can achieve both. When I joined the Air Force, I wrote a blank check to America that I was willing to give anything, including my life, in defense of this nation. I would do it all over again. Now I humbly ask President Trump to continue to stand with the military members and veterans who revere him for his exceptional loyalty in times of great struggle. We would be eternally grateful to President Trump if he could help our families and our Afghan brothers and sisters in harm's way who fought and bled alongside us. The American public deserves to know that President Trump stands by us where others before failed. I want to put out the call to any Afghans in any situation who want to share their stories that I would love to share them here. Every one of these episodes is enriched by having the words of an Afghan talking about what they're going through. So please, if you want to share your story about any aspect of the last 3.5 years, of the 20 years that preceded them, whatever you would like to talk about, you can send it to the Afghanistan Project Podcast at gmail.com. You guys have given me some hope, which is really great, and I hope that everyone who's listening feels that hope. And if you have access to a group with funds that they need to offload, or, like you guys said, those small donations, they do make an impact.
Yes.
Please do what you can and help and show the Afghan people what volunteers like you guys have been trying to show them all along, that we care, that we want them here, and that we want them to succeed, and we are grateful for what they've done for us. Thank you all again for being here. Thank you to everyone who listened, and Tasha Kaur, and hope to see you again soon.
See you guys.